Hi, everyone. It's great to see that so many of you have joined us today. I hope that everyone enjoyed the sessions of earlier today and yesterday as well. Let's wait for a few seconds for everyone to join. And in the interim, I would like to ask you to stretch your fingers as we will be covering some questions at the end of this session. So please type and submit your questions beforehand, and then we can cover those at the end. So let's get started. My name is Stephanie, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm working on the investment team at Notion Capital, which is a B2B software-focused VC fund investing in the early stages of European technology companies based out of London. And the timing of this panel is great because we're just about to announce a new RegTech investment in the next couple of days, which will enable financial institutions to fully digitalize the management of their non-financial risks. I'm also on the board of a synthetic generation company called Hazy. And we're joined today by a fantastic speaker panel. They will share their insights into how AI is interacting with the areas of GDPR, data sharing and data privacy. And the format will be a little bit different as I will be giving out some statements for the panelists to agree or disagree with and comment on. But before we jump in, I would like to ask the speakers to briefly introduce themselves and maybe, let's see, starting with you, Santiago.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Santiago Castro. I'm the Chief Data Officer of FBM Bank. I have been there for 2 years, and before that I worked for 16 years in consulting, always in the data space, technology space.
Very good, thank you. Peggy?
Hi, I'm Peggy Tsai. I'm the VP of Data Solutions at BigID. I've been here about 9 months, and prior to that, I've worked in the financial services industry as a data governance practitioner, where I helped build out data programs from a strategic and operational perspective, and one of my projects was for GDPR.
Oh, great background to have on board here today. Last but not least, Rick, please.
Hi, I'm Rick Hawkins. I'm the Global Risk and Global Finance Chief Data Officer at HSBC. Obviously, actually similar to Santiago, spent many years in data and in consulting before it was cool, and now find myself, in a real job building data capability across risk and finance, responsible for compliance with numerous data regulations, including GDPR, that impact our risk and finance functions.
Very good, very good. So it's a great array of panelists here today. So actually, what would like to start with you, Rick, because this might be relevant to your areas of expertise. Giving the first statement, even though GDPR implementation was almost 2 years ago, we're still trying to figure out many aspects of how to protect our data. Do you agree or disagree, and why?
I'm going to have to disagree. But I say we're not still trying to figure it out. I mean, as a bank, as you imagine, we've got very strong frameworks for protection of our customer data. And remember, banks were subject to all sorts of, we're incredibly regulated. We're subject to all sorts of regulations way before GDPR. Obviously, cybersecurity concerns over data leakage controls are really strong in this space. I think the essence of the challenge you're kind of asking comes from some of those aspects around the consent and the rights to be forgotten, and some of those aspects which in an interesting way end up contradicting some of the things we have to do in terms of anti-money laundering, fraud prevention. I can't just forget about things that have happened. You can't go and apply for a credit card, go buy some Centex and then ask to be forgotten. There's a contradiction about some of the things that we have to do. What's complicated in an organization like mine is that the rules are kind of subtly different across all the jurisdictions across the world. And it becomes really complicated, less about GDPR, but more about what we can and can't share across border. Just as a kind of little anecdote, things like salary information is very private to most people, but it's public information in parts of Sweden. Conversely, your IP address, which is, it's your IP address, right? Well, that's considered to be personal information in Germany. So the nuances of some of this become really complicated when you're operating across the sort of globe in the way that we do.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing some of that insights, especially if you hear that it might be an exponential hard problem to solve when you deal with so many different countries and regulations, local regulations. And maybe Santiago, could you comment on, and kind of related to this field, as kind of we start using more technology to help us speed up with GDPR, has your spending and budget therefore increased more significantly in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I will say yes on that one. So basically, to give you a little bit of context to understand, and this is again my particular case, it may be different for every different organization's budgets and things are very different everywhere. But in my particular case, I said I started 2 years ago. I joined the bank. And it kind of came at the same time that GDPR was starting to really be implemented, at least as a regulation. It came at the same time. So for me, it was a really good coincidence because I needed to, in a way, I joined the bank to create the data practice and bring a kind of centralized strategy, bring a data unit before data was a little bit all over. And with that, bring some traction around data projects. So because there was the GDPR and everybody was talking about that, that also created momentum. And often regulations, the good things of regulations is that it gives you a deadline, but also a little bit of a fear of if I'm not compliant, what happens? So with all that in mind, you could create buy-in among the different stakeholders and also appeal for some budgets that needed to be spent if we wanted to be compliant. So definitely, yes, I got more spending in the data area. There was more attention. And that also helped with technology because when I joined, I didn't have yet a consolidated team. Actually, I didn't have a team at all. I had to create it myself. And even if you go fast, the complexity of the systems that you have, the variety and volume of the data that you have makes that just, for example, to classify data in order to be compliant, in order to know what is, I don't know, confidential versus what is public data versus what is secret data or very sensitive data, all this classification, if you want to do that manually with the volume and complexity you have, you never finish. And because I didn't have a big team, I could actually make the case to get some spending in some really interesting technologies. Actually talking about AI, I found a technology that allows the machine to start looking at the data sources and being trained is a little bit of machine learning, where you actually dive into every single column of, say, a matrix where you don't only have the metadata, but you see the patterns of every single column in a big table to understand this looks as something sensitive or personal. This looks like an email. This looks like a bank account. This looks like a product reference, etc. So you start learning and as you train it, the confidence of being accurate becomes higher and higher. And when you feel it's already well trained, you throw it to the rest of all your systems. And there you go, you have your data classification that allows you to do your GDPR. So this is just an example where you can bring technology as an ally to be compliant, and you get spending in some budgets to bring those technologies because we had a deadline, because we didn't have yet too much people, the team wasn't big, and also because we saw technology does it most efficiently, and after that we kept using those type of technologies for any other purposes. So yes, GDPR did help to put that in the agenda and bring the budgets and bring the technology.
That's great to hear. I mean, with the increase of budget, there's obviously you know a bit of a big field to sift through in terms of where to spend the budget and what maybe AI algorithms can also bring the cost savings back into the business ultimately. And you mentioned some of the training of the AI models already, which is kind of coming into the next statement and Peggy, maybe you do want to take this. As AI itself represents a significant risk in terms of GDPR compliance, and we don't know the way that the models are trained at the moment. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think that's a very interesting statement. For saying that AI in itself is a significant risk. As someone who's always done data governance, data management, I always feel that AI and a person who's actually reviewing the data should really go hand in hand. So the actual modeling and the predictive part of the technology, it certainly should be balanced with data governance practices. You know, I think it's important where, in terms of relying solely on AI, you know, you want to make sure that the organization has the transparency, the auditing, and accountability. Especially when you make sure that the data is actually being validated. And I love Santiago's point. And being a technology vendor ourselves at BigID, we do look at you know, within the tables and the columns, we actually look at the actual data values and determine whether or not the value is a credit card number versus a date of birth versus an account date. So there's so much that AI and machine learning models can help to predict, and certainly up to a certain accuracy level. But there are certainly outliers and validations, right, that need to be certainly be done by the data teams that need to validate that. So I think AI and machine learning has certainly propelled and scaled a lot of these processes for large organizations. But from my background, my perspective, in balancing it out with the accountability of a data governance team is certainly something I think should be a part of the equation.
Great, thank you, Peggy. Do you want to add anything to that, maybe, Rick? I saw you nodding along with Peggy here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously part of my world is we do an awful lot of modeling, and predictive modeling in banking, not just for customer decisioning, but also for back office, regulatory reporting, risk, RWA calculations, impairment calculations, LGDs, all the rest of it. And I guess I got a different spin on it, which is I think our regulators, I hope not too many of them are listening in, have a real concern over the use of AI and ML in this space. And I guess what we're doing and what we're seeing is that we're kind of doing this for our own internal models and internal things first, so that we can get a real understanding of how they work. There's a real fear within the regulatory space that these models are going to make a decision, and we can't see how they've come to that decision. Increasingly, to Peggy's point around the areas of data governance, what we're starting to look at and see is the prevalence of ethics coming into play associated with modeling AI and machine learning, and ensuring that we have clean data sets against which we can train our models. And it's not just what Peggy and Santiago are referring to about, knowing that this is a bank account, that this is a credit card number. It's around the fact that because through AI and machine learning, we can associate so many more different variables into our models than we could have done before. Whereas we would have had a couple of hundred points in some of our model files, we're talking about thousands of points coming into our model files now. What we are honestly concerned about is that historically we've lent to middle-aged white men. When I train a model with data, it doesn't matter if I take sex and age away from it. There are other pointers, there are pseudo pointers that can come back to potentially revealing a bias and put a bias into our machines. I mean, the one that I throw away as a trite example is that, there are not many guys out there driving around in pink polos. So if you know the color of the car and the make of the car, there's a deduction that you can come in here, right? And as trite as that might seem, that's really real in sync. I mean, we have an insurance sector ourselves. That's really real in our insurance sector, because what you can't be doing from an ethics perspective is be seen to including into your models things which are actually, alternates, and that's the big concern around, and the risk around sort of, I suppose, GDPR in this context, is the fact that it's enormously easy to do an inference associated with what may be disconnected data to come up with an association, which is basically a pseudo. And that's the concern. That's what the regulators are concerned about. And anybody that knows anything about the details of sort of loss given default modeling will know that today we have to put the best part of 800 pages of documentation explaining how our models work. And if as part of that, I'm actually saying, and I use this magic AI machine learning algorithm that does some statistics and comes up with the answer, yeah, the regulators are not very happy about that. And I guess final point on this is what we are, however, seeing is that we're increasingly seeing and using technologies which do a degree of self-documentation along the way, so that they are giving pointers as to how they went through the decision trees or the decision points or the determining factors that went in to sway it in one direction or another. That's where we're starting to come out of this. And I think that's what we will land with the regulators being something that they consider to be a sensible way forward in terms of self-documenting AI and ML.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much for that insight. In a way, GDPR might reduce some of the flow of data that's available going into these algorithms as well, maybe thereby slightly biasing the algorithms in the end.
Well, it certainly made insurance cheaper for gentlemen that are driving cars.
That's a good and a bad, I suppose. Slightly less good for me, but very good. And please, for the audience, do not forget to submit your questions for us to answer at the end of the session. But moving on, Santiago, let's have this one for you. Your customers are very concerned about GDPR to the point that they have lost some customers because of this issue. Do you agree or disagree with this one?
I will disagree in the sense that we haven't really lost customers, maybe because we saw the GDPR really as an opportunity. And I guess here again is how you kind of work with the regulation to make it something that actually benefit both sides. So the way we saw it from the beginning is that GDPR in a way is giving us, yes, a constraint, we need to comply, but also a responsibility and an opportunity to communicate. In a way, the data we hold with about our customers, we hold it if there is a reason for us to hold it to actually benefit our customers. In a way, data is more and more becoming a something we're trading. So just to give you an example, when you have your mobile phone and you have your GPS and you access and you say, Google, I shared my location with Google, is because you are trading with Google to be able to navigate the city and find your way. So in a way, you are sharing your data so Google can give you within the maps a service. In a way, we are actually both benefiting from that. If you see things this way, the customers can actually benefit from allowing us to use their data. So what we used in this context is really an opportunity to communicate with them, to really from the early beginning of the GDPR kind of effort to make us compliant, we took contact with them. We started to create all this content about how are we using your the data, what's the privacy notices, where do we have cookies, what is it for, and explaining really why we need it or not, and in what context and how they could benefit about it. And in a way, we created a conversation. And what customers like is having, you know, touch points with us. So the more they understand what we are doing, the more they understand that that relationship they can trust, the more there is going to be engagement and they're going to actually stay, because they realize, well, they can trust us with that. They're happy to continue the relationship. So for us, it was really an opportunity to get in touch with them and communicate and actually be transparent. And I think if organizations do that way, it's a win-win. We are both actually exchanging here. Is a way of exchange. But you need to be, of course, transparent and open and responsible. And in a way, for us, it allowed us to maintain the customers, if not enhance it.
I very much like that strong view of yours. The data portability, right, could actually well serve as a benefit for many companies instead of kind of more related to the customers more easily to switch on the other hand. Very good. Maybe you, Peggy, as a company in the space, I've seen large organizations making a shift towards using technologies to optimize their processes. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I mean, as the sole vendor on this panel, we talk to many global enterprise organizations, right? BigID is actually based in New York, so we have in the United States there's the California Consumer Privacy Act, and talks about a federal privacy law. But certainly, I've seen the shift starting with GDPR, and certainly working on GDPR as early as 2016 and 2017. And one of the things that we had issues with when I was at that organization was just not having an inventory, understanding our complete business processes. So many organizations, they're dealing with petabytes, large scales of data. You're talking about structured and unstructured, and not really being able to have a really holistic end-to-end data governance framework and process of all their data. So, we continue to talk to many of our customers who are still doing things like the data subject access requests or DSARs manually. And I feel like one of the reasons why they started it manually was because they weren't, again, sure about the demand and how it was actually going to be, how the regulators were actually going to enforce some of these privacy regulations. So I think a lot more customers are actually looking towards BigID now, especially to help them automate a lot of their privacy compliance and ensuring that what they're doing for DSARs or data subject access requests is complete. I think that's one of the risks that they don't want to expose themselves to, is to fulfill any of these subject access requests and leave behind personal information that hasn't been documented, or just imagining the sheer volume of data that's out there. We see a lot of customers leverage technology to be their, if not their first, their second line of defense, to certainly ensure and enable that they've discovered and documented all their personal information regarding a person, a customer, or an entity. So certainly technology, in this case for GDPR, is helping them scale, optimize, be more efficient, and reduce any potential risk and ensure that they are in compliance.
Very interesting. And you must really have seen kind of companies embarking on that growth journey, using technology in this field to reap the benefits from it and learn continuously. So that's great to hear. Maybe going back to you, Rick, due to GDPR, our processes have changed and they have negatively impacted the user experience.
Oof, okay. So yeah, our processes have had to change. I would like to think they haven't really impacted the user experience. I mean, I know that the sort of the shock and awe, the fact that you go to a website and you have to click all of these things, accepting cookies, you have to do all of this stuff now. And I guess, so we've all been caught up in that. I don't think that, the banks in particular have suffered any more than any other industry. I think the thing that is challenging here, particularly in my context, given all of the things that we do with data, is that, and Santiago might have some views as well, is that user experience when I'm asking you, is it okay to have marketing? Is it okay? At some point, the user just gets, I just take this away from me. I don't want to do this. So any more than about 5 or 6, well, usually 3 or 4, but if I've got any more than 6 kind of check boxes on a form, people are just totally turned off. And so the challenge really comes over making things succinct and legal, and making sure that you're actually capturing the information you need to capture for legitimate business purposes, rather than absolutely, flooding them with, do you okay if I do this? Is it okay if you do this? Is it okay if I do that? And that becomes a very delicate line to draw. When with a multinational like myself, where we do so many different things, that becomes increasingly harder than if you're a smaller fintech bank or a startup bank that literally is just offering, saving and checking accounts. And so we kind of I would say, it's like, oh, woe is me, but we kind of disproportionately affected because of all the potential things that we can do. And there is obviously criticism both ways, that we tend to ask really general questions. But if we didn't ask general questions about how I'm going to use your data, you're going to be filling in a questionnaire for 20 minutes, and that will negatively impact the user experience. So what we have found is that we ask the information that we need to ask. What has been impacted, and particularly behind the scenes from my perspective, is making sure that consent framework about what we can do with the data passes through with it. And that's the real challenge. That is the real challenge. I know there's some questions coming on that probably lead into that as well later on.
Perfect. Santiago, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to hear it, because I do find kind of a similar kind of world and challenges. Definitely our process have changed. I mean, you definitely need to do things differently. So there have been quite significant changes, but I would also like to think that not necessarily to impact negatively. As I was saying before, we have a relationship with our customers that is strong. In a way, one indicator is very interesting, is that the DSARs that we have received, subject access requests, have not come much from our customers. Even we don't really have significant of those. They come from employees that left and want to get their data. So just to say that our customers tend to trust us with the data. They haven't used that, and for me that's a good indicator. Now, yes, processes have changed, and a little bit to echo what Rick was saying, the difficulty of not flooding them with a lot of questions is even more difficult. That the GDPR came in a point where we are living other things that are changing and pushing us to change. We're living in more digitizing banking, digital banking, so integrating our front end with our back end processes. When you start creating, say, of course, internet banking and apps that are completely integrated with your transactional systems, you need to also think about how the systems work, the customer journey is impacted in relation to the operations. But even more so, we are living in a world where we are now talking about open banking, PSD2. What that means is you, as a bank, need to also interact with other organizations that are sometimes offering your services through their platforms. And that means, to the point of Rick, that you need to then ask again the question maybe when it was already asked over there. And that makes life much more complex. So we are living so many changes at the same time that impacts all the same problems. I don't know, Rick, if we are in the same world, I guess, but it's challenging.
Yeah, no, very, very much so. And like to part the question that's sort of coming in about obtaining that consent, particularly when it's minors and all the rest of it, because at the face of it, GDPR and PSD2 can be counterintuitive. It's like, I'm not allowed to use your data to do any marketing, but actually my competition can come in and take that data and I have to offer it to them. So there are some interesting conundrums in there. And I think the thing that it comes back to is in terms of legitimate business purpose. And I guess, the question in there is, particularly in relation to under 18s and all of that sort of stuff, like we have back-end processes which are entirely legitimate, anti-money laundering, fraud protection, credit ratings, all of it. That is part of what we do as part of our service. And to the question about how do I get consent for that, it's like that's basically the consent you give in order to actually give money and work money for the bank. We have a regulatory imperative that we must provide information to our regulators, and that ties into why we have to have that data and what we have to do with it. What we don't capture at that level, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, is we don't automatically now put those sorts of individuals into marketing, and that's really and comes back to what was the purpose of GDPR, and have we as banks been unnaturally caught up in it? You know, a colleague sort of once highlighted that the GDPR test is the kind of is it creepy test, right? It was really kind of in there to make sure that we as companies weren't doing anything a bit dodgy with your data. And you know, classic examples from the retail industry from years back, where we had, you know, outraged father going, why are you sending my child, you know, pregnancy vouchers and all the rest of it? It was because the analytics behind the background showed that, you know, a certain individual was likely to be pregnant. And those are the sorts of things that the GDPR is trying to stop and block and tackle and prevent. In some respects, some of the things that we have to deal with, particularly with the conflicting regulations, and particularly with now conflicting regulations between the EU and the US and other parts of the world, where we then have to get agreements that we can transfer the data and have that in place as corporate information, specifically excluding the personally identifiable data, so that we don't get caught up into this accidental situation. And when it becomes just a transaction, and it hasn't got anything associated with whether it's a 13-year-old child or not, it's just a transaction, I'm therefore having that as a legitimate business purpose to understand where the money came from, where it went to. It goes through the regulatory endeavors around reporting. It's part of our sanctions and screening and all of this sort of stuff. And therefore it's absolutely essential for what we're doing and how we operate as a bank.
Very interesting, and thank you for answering that as well at the same time. Very good. Last statement for you, Peggy, which might be more related to the business side and selling technology. But when I'm selling to my customers, the main concern they raise is protecting their customers.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly an interesting statement. I mean, this is about GDPR, but if you think about who handles GDPR requests in a data organization, and even if I'm sure if I asked Rick and Santiago, chief data officers, I don't think that they would say, or maybe putting words in your mouth, GDPR is their sole focus, and compliance is their sole primary focus for a data officer. And I talked to many data officers, and certainly there should be a more of a business aspect to and a value, right, to what their data organization brings to the table. And certainly we see a lot of our customers, they view compliance as building out almost a miniature data governance program, but because privacy and data analytics teams, AI teams, they're pooling together this single source of truth or inventory of data, and it really should be beyond privacy. I mean, holistically, there should be a bigger view of how this consolidated information is going to be used by other teams such as sales and marketing and analytics to get value out of this, because we see a lot of customers spending and putting all this investment in making sure that their lineage, their inventory, their authoritative sources, all that is documented for the purposes of GDPR. You're standardizing definitions, you have data mapping, things like that. Those are very standard governance activities that is being done for GDPR and other privacy regulations. And my hope, and I've seen organizations that it's also leveraged and reusable for other purposes that benefits the business activity as well.
Very good, thank you. And would like to ask, and actually each of you, but maybe starting with you, Peggy, to tie into the last point you just raised. One piece of advice for large organizations using AI to get GDPR compliant, to communicate with their customers, and to make sure that the processes are also easy to get through. Do you have any kind of brief advice for the audience?
Sure, so I'll keep this brief. I would say, and take a look at your privacy tech stack, making sure that you're using the right automated tools that looks at across your structured and unstructured data, and making sure that I've seen a lot of data governance audits. They're looking for automation, they're looking for risk reduction. Those are the type of questions that you should be proactively looking, making sure your technology is serving its purpose.
Perfect, thank you. Rick, Santiago?
I'll chip in. To me, it's get the basics of data governance on structured data right first. And to me, that comes down to what I call what, where, and why. If I know what data I have, I know where it's stored, and I know why, what business purpose I'm using it for. Everything else hangs off the back of that. My unstructured data hangs off the back of that as well. And that really gets me in a really good space so that I can understand whether or not I am compliant with not just GDPR, but a bunch of other regulations as well, because it comes down to certain sets of data. Sets of data on their own aren't necessarily a problem. It's like when they're applied to a business process in a particular jurisdiction or a particular location, then they become problematic. So having that basic what, where, why understood upfront first, super helpful. Everything else then slots into place.
Perfect, thank you so much. Santiago.
Yes, coming back to the question of the AI first, how to kind of use it in the sense for being compliant. I guess, AI, machine learning, at the end of the day, is statistics, right? So if you use statistics, you can use it for one purpose, for another purpose. You can use it right, you can use it wrong, right? So it really depends on how you are using it. I was giving the example or my first example was related to helping you classify data, right? To be compliant, you need to know what you have. If I have all sorts of data sets and I don't know where is my sensitive data that I need to protect versus where is my public data that I can be more relaxed a little bit about it, where is my data that I actually have been there for more than 7 years and I need to erase, which one I need to archive, which ones actually when someone asks for a desire, how can I find it? So what do I have? And for that, statistics can help. Pattern recognition and then classification, and it's simple statistics. We all know how to employ statistics for classifying and creating segments for segmentation, right? Now, easy way of use and easy outcome, AI there can help. There are other more sophisticated ways, and I agree with Rick what he was saying before about more kind of complex modeling, for example, for risk calculation, where if your insurance is basing your premium based on a classification of an individual based on proxies that can be biased, then yes, we're having a problem. So here is again, how are you using those statistics for what purpose? Do you really know what you are doing, or is it a black box? So again, it's about really understanding what you have and how you use it and for what. And at the end of the day, for different users, different techniques apply, but are you in control of your data and the techniques you are using? Can you explain them transparently how they work? And if you are, then I think machines are a good tool to use, because at the end of the day, it's a tool for someone that is in control, not the other way around. And if you're in control, you can be compliant. Now, the other advice I would give is a journey. It's a journey that is ongoing. So it means it's not that I'm compliant in a point T, and then T plus 1 plus 3 plus 4, I may actually not be compliant. You need to constantly be in control of your data, of your data sets, of your governance, of what you have, and of course of the techniques and how you use it. If you have a modeling technique and it's documented and something changed, you need to reevaluate again the way you are using that technique. And often those models change, so then see what is the implication of that change. Will that affect actually the way I am using my data and eventually impacting my customer? So it's something you need to keep doing ongoing, and you need to revisiting year by year how your data is used and how your models are being used in your data, how is that impacting your client, and it's not just a one-off. It needs to continue all the time. So that's another advice, I guess, to keep compliance up with the use of your data.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We have one question from the audience that we can answer in the limited time that we have. So I'll just posting it out there. What are your views on Schrems 2 judgment, US EU Privacy Shield, and how this can affect what RegTech can offer? That's to say that a lot of RegTech have US shareholders. Any views on that?
Probably closest to me than anyone else. I guess the short answer is yes, it's going to have an impact, right? We're still trying to work out exactly what it all means, but fundamentally from my perspective, back to those what, where, why, and the governance constructs that we've been establishing as a company, we operate in 67 different jurisdictions. So we have what we call intercompany agreements to be able to move information from one system to another. Also, the complexity associated with our organization, not all our US data is in the US, and that causes a challenge as well. So the short answer is we're still working it through. The longer answer is having a good framework for ensuring that you have data transfers, data sharing, data privacy in place, so that you can then deal with these sorts of things as they show up, is a sensible way forward. And the way that we've been building that through, and we've built our own internal system that we refer to as data visa, is part of our visas, passports, and embassies. Because where we've got data locked in certain jurisdictions, they're in an embassy. Where we've got data moving around, I need to make sure that it has a passport to move around. And where there is a entry or exit criteria, we establish visas rules. We've taken that approach, and it's starting to really simplify, and that's really helping us. So when these sorts of things come up and go, this corridor is no longer free to travel, we've got to establish visa and passport rules for it. We at least know which processes on which systems and where we need to do them on. So that's how we're doing it. I'm not sure, Santiago or Peggy, if you've got any views on it in particular.
I really like your idea. I may pick it up as well. The visas and the corridors, really interesting one.
Great. And sorry, go ahead, Peggy.
Oh, I mean, just as a vendor, I mean, we certainly help with identifying, where data sources are flowing. So the cross-border issue is something that we certainly help out with. So. Agree with the whole data governance as a practice framework and utilizing technology to implement and be in compliance.
Yeah, well, we certainly are using some privacy and other tooling to help us with that one. But I guess the other thing is it's not just the Schrems 2. We've got the Great Firewall of China that is going up harder and heavier. We've got things happening all over the globe which are causing this kind of challenge, which, Santiago, please feel free to take my data, visas, passports, and embassies. It's a real simple concept, and the board love it, and it makes sense to them, right?
Yeah, sounds really good. And things like that you can explain well, then the processes follow much easier. So
yeah, exactly.
Really good. Yeah.
Very good. Well, with that great answer, I would like to wrap this up as we've been running way over time. I would like to thank our speakers, Peggy, Rick, Santiago, all of you for your great insights, and also the audience for their great questions that you have sent in. I would like to pass you over now to Richard from FinTech Global.
Thank you, Stephanie. Fantastic. And thank you all for ending Stream A and our second day with a fantastic discussion that could have gone on for a lot longer. Stephanie, thank you for your fantastic chairing of that. And Peggy, Rick, Santiago, thank you for sharing your views and insights. Very, very valuable, I'm sure, for all the people listening, as it's such an important issue. That is the end of Stream A for everyone listening. But it's not quite the end. There's still half an hour to go and visit the exhibition booths. Please do that. As I mentioned before, and not only will you be enlightened, there are also, I think, some fabulous free gifts that if you don't take them, I'm going to go and sweep them all up. Thank you to everyone that participated. As I mentioned, we had 1,700 delegates that we allowed. We actually turned away quite a number. You'd be surprised how many people who aren't in the industry just want to sign up. But 1,700 relevant people sign up. Over 1,000 of them are tuned in live today and yesterday, and we expect many of the rest will download on demand. So much of this information will be available on demand, and follow-up information will be available on our websites, FinTech Global, RegTech Analyst, and our newsletters. So please use that to get the information and to keep making sure you're updated on a daily basis. Thank you to all our sponsors, speakers, exhibitors, and of course you, the delegates, without whom we couldn't have done this. Today's been another day of insights and informative presentations and lively discussions. So hopefully you found both days to be very informative. Hope you managed to engage with the people and the content that matters to you, that's most relevant. And please do join us for our future events and the range of webinars and workshops that we're planning to do online. The fact of the matter is, the next year, marketing, business development, and fundraising is going to be predominantly digital. So if we have a lot of things planned with our global network, so if you'd like to get involved, please let us know. And we'd love to have such fantastic presenters and panelists to join us for that. So I'd just like to say thank you. See you very soon. See you in the virtual exhibition booths. Do go there before you go, and look forward to meeting you again online.